Is the sound okay? Can you guys hear me well?
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, well, I'm from Spain and I have a beautiful Spanish accent. If I speak too fast with my beautiful Spanish accent, please let me know. Don't be shy to tell me, hey, dude, you're talking too fast, or I will do my best to speak clearly and to make myself understood. Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I'm totally okay with that. Yeah. So I have been living and working in Asia for over 20 years now. I studied in Japan, my master, my PhD, but most of my work has been in Sri Lanka first. Then I moved to Malaysia. And for the last 5 years, I have been working in China, in Sichuan. And I'm a conservation ecologist or conservation biologist. My main interest is on the conservation of endangered species. And I study elephants. Elephants are the biggest animals, the biggest terrestrial animals, and I guess you know how elephants look like. But I can tell you why I study elephants. I was not particularly, I mean, it was not a kind of something I had been always interested in, or it was not something that I had a particular interest or affinity to elephants. But when I moved to Sri Lanka and I began to do some preliminary work there, it became overwhelmingly, they were present, they were so important in everything, in the two dimensions that I have made my own career. So and I adopted them as my professional interest, and I have been studying them for over 20 years. As the biggest animals, you know that elephants, they're very big, and as an animal being big, the main purpose of elephants becoming so big was to avoid predation, to not have anyone who can eat them. Most herbivores, like elephants, will have three things to worry in life. One is finding food, another one is finding mates, and the third one is not being eaten. Elephants were able to skip the third one and just focusing on finding food and finding mates. And being so big, they have very big impact on ecosystems. Anything they do, they influence the environment. So when elephants eat, an adult elephant could consume 150 to 100 kilograms of food in a day. So that's a lot of plants to break, to pull, to tear down, a lot of leftovers. So this affects the physical structure of ecosystems, what we call the forest structure, plus the composition, plus the dominance between different plant species, plus nutrient cycling. When elephants walk, they trample, they smash, they compact the ground. Elephants consume many fruits, and then they move around and defecate. So that when they defecate, not only moving nutrients, but they also dispersing seeds of plants. They play an important role in ecosystem regeneration and forest regeneration. So for these reasons, I became very interested in elephant conservation, not for the sake of elephants, but for the sake of the ecosystem. So it's clear that if you want to conserve ecosystems that evolve having elephants and you lose the elephants, the ecosystem is losing a very important agent. But something that I took some time to understand was that the elephants are very difficult to live with. For elephants living with people and for people living with elephants is not easy. Elephants are a dominant species. Since they don't have predators, they didn't evolve to have much fear or to have a very acute sense of what not to do. They eat what they want to eat, they go where they want to go, and they evolved in a time in which there was no one to challenge them. But around 2 million years ago, some smart primates appeared in Eastern and Southern Africa, and then we expanded throughout the planet. And nowadays, all the elephants live very close to humans. And we have what we call human-elephant conflict. So wherever you go that you have elephants in Asia, the main issue in that area will be the human-elephant conflict. For example, where I live in Sichuan, people are very, very scared of elephants. They're quite terrified of them. And actually, it's surprising to see how people think of elephants as a very big constraint in what they can do, they cannot do. So my particular research interest is dealing with these two things, understanding how elephants impact ecosystems and how elephant conservation is important for the conservation of ecosystems. And the other one is to study human-elephant interactions to see how we can prevent people suffering from elephant damages or damage caused by elephants, so we can actually conserve elephants. The way I see is that if we cannot reduce this conflict, there is no future for elephants or for any other conflict prone species. But elephants are the most prone species. In Asia, I estimate that every year between 600 and 800 people are killed by elephants every year, which I think is not commonly known. If this was terrorism or if this was many natural hazards, we will see it as a massive disaster. But here it's being seen as I think it has very low profile. For example, in China, people don't want to talk much about that because it's seen as going against the conservation efforts. We want to conserve elephants. We want to have more elephants, but when you have more elephants next to people, you'll have more people attacked by elephants and killed by elephants. So this presents a very, very difficult conundrum. We're trying to do two things. We're trying to increase the number of elephants because they're in danger, they live in very small populations, and we need to have bigger populations to conserve them. But as we do this, we know it will have very negative consequences for people. So I think in the context of human rights, this is a very, very interesting and difficult story, right? I guess we all agree on the importance of biodiversity conservation. We all want to have more tigers, more elephants, more forest. But at the same time, we want people who live near this forest or inside this forest to feel safe and to be able to develop according to what they consider, more, whatever path they want to develop that is sensible. And people like me create trouble for them because I want to have more elephants, and more elephants means more conflict. So then it's, I think, part of our responsibility to think about how to do conservation without creating burden for these local communities, and definitely making sure that the cost of conservation doesn't fall on these communities living next to the protected areas. There is no easy solution for this, and I think in the last few years there has been an increasing conflict between the field of conservation and some people focusing on human rights, particularly people focusing on indigenous communities. There is a bad history in conservation with, for example, authorities expelling native communities from protected areas, or just forcing people to move away from the homes in order to promote conservation. I personally think that this conflict hasn't been very fair in the last 10, 15 years. There have been some activist organizations that have often tried to make a big deal out of probably not very common situations. But it's true that we are trying to do things that they might not be always compatible, and we need to compromise. And how to compromise between local communities and ecosystems is going to be a bit challenging. I'm not sure if this is in line with the kind of issues that you wanted to discuss, Peter.
Yeah, I have a question actually connecting to this. You said a conflict between some people. Can you specify this some people? Because looking at human rights, that's for me, first glance, the most important question of defining actually. We discussed it on a very general level, human rights. Who is human? Who and what is a human being? And that's, of course, a matter of class interests, of different national interests, and. So can you elaborate a little bit on this?
Yeah, so I think, and I guess you're familiar with conflict studies, right? So then there are many stakeholders with different interests in any particular complex situation. So then the conflicts that I'm referring to have to do with some NGOs that have been doing campaigns against conservation policies, for example, in Africa and India, and accusing big conservation NGOs like WWF of taking, caring more for animals than for people, presenting a conflict like, hey, you care more about whales than you care about poor people, or you care more about people, or you care more about in your national park than you care about the local communities living there. And in some cases that has been true, that there have been situations in which the conservation field has had behaviors that nowadays will not be considered acceptable. But also I think that sometimes has been a bit, some anecdotes have been converted into kind of a general attitude in the field. And I think that has been detrimental to deal with complex situations in which I think we all want the best for people and for conservation, but often we need to compromise in the real world. And then also some different angle of this story is that I'm working with animals like elephants. They are very unique animals in which that they're very intelligent and they're very sentient. So then this presents another angle is, what is human rights? Do gorillas have human rights? Do elephants have human rights? Do rivers have human rights? As you know, in some countries, natural features like rivers have a humanhood status, and they have been declared to have rights in themselves, like in New Zealand. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. Somebody else taking the word? Yeah, John.
Yeah, John.
Hey, good to see you again.
Hi, John.
I say Ahimsa, right?
Ahimsa.
I hope I pronounced.
Ahimsa.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I have a question. You mentioned that the elephant, the conflict between the elephant and the human. Have you ever noticed a news that it's like 2 years ago? I remember the group of elephants from Yunnan Yuxi. Yes, they migrate to the north. It's not to the south, right? Because to the more southern part is actually the border. It's next. It's near different places. But to the northern part, it would be colder. It's not that very suitable for the elephants and inhabitants. So could you make comments, to this event? Yeah, because this is kind of like I would say this is very the first event in China. So many people, they have never seen this real elephant before in the counties or even in the cities, right? And this is really like they would be very horrifying. It's like the huge body of the elephants, and they are just walking around. And I noticed that the local governments, they have made different kinds of like plans that the risk management, different risk management if there is any attack to people or attack to the houses, even to other things. I mean, like the cars. So, would you make any comments to this?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a very, very interesting phenomenon. So what happened is that in 2019, all the way to 2020, there was a very severe drought. So then it was a very unusual drought. Like the last like this was like 50 years ago, and elephants at that time didn't have much food in the forest where they live. They live in a forest that is not too far from here. They live in Mongyang, which is behind those mountains you can see there. And because there was no food and the forest was full of elephants, what we have is that this population has been increasing in numbers for about 25 years. So the forest was full of elephants. Suddenly, the amount of food decreases. So there's less food and the same amount of elephants. So two groups of elephants decided to just leave their home. And this is not the common behavior. Okay, elephants normally, they have a home range that we call a place where they always live, and they don't leave from that place. But in this case, two families at the same time just left. One went north, and the other one came south. They came here to the place where I am right now. And once they left, I think they got lost. Okay, so I think because they were going to the unknown. They were just going looking for food, not looking for any particular location. They were just trying to find a suitable place. And they went a bit north. And eventually they got in a place with a lot of human density, a place with a lot of agriculture, a lot of people, and not much natural habitat. So then they just kept on walking and they got very used to eat crops. And they were lucky because this happened in 2021. And at that time, humans have a strong conservation ethos and people were letting them go. The authorities were moving away people to let them go. If this happened 50 years ago, someone would have killed them, okay, in anywhere in the world. If you see elephants in this kind of agricultural landscape, someone would have eventually killed them because they cause incredible economic cost to local people. But at that time, the authorities, it was such a big thing that the authorities were very, very cautious for no one to be attacked by elephants. So they were moving the people away as elephants move. And elephants could go wherever they want. So then they just began to walk faster and faster until they found themselves almost in Kunming, in a city of almost 9 million people. And the authorities saw this as an opportunity to showcase how China has embraced conservation, presented as a conservation success. So they had this difficult problem. They had 14 elephants just next to a very big city, 300 kilometers away from the elephant home, and they didn't know what to do. And then they found a way to bring them back, which was a system of blocking ways, using trucks, and then luring them with food to attract them towards the food. I thought it would not work. When we discussed this, I thought it's not going to work. It's too difficult, but they made it work. They tried very hard. They made it work. They employed over 1,000 trucks, over 15,000 drones, I think. No, sorry, 15,000 vehicles, 1,000 drones, and 25,000 agents to move these elephants. Never before a group of animals got so many resources. It was a very unprecedented situation. And as you say, people could see the elephants for the first time because there was such a good quality drone image, and there was 24/7 recording of the elephants that people could see for the first time elephants playing with each other, elephants helping each other, elephants fighting sometimes, elephants being jealous, a lot of behaviors, elephants outsmarting situations and being ingenious about how to solve problems. So then this was a massive event to attract attention over how complex these animals are. But also I think was a very good opportunity to showcase how difficult it is to conserve these animals. It's not enough to have goodwill. You cannot have these animals in an environment that is not suitable because they can create massive damage. The amount of crops they destroyed, the amount of things that they can break, and even the amount of human lives that they can take is something that society is not going to accept. So then if we want to conserve them, it's not enough to have goodwill. We need to have vast extensions of natural habitat. We need to have good conservation policies. We need to think about how to support people living next to them. So it's a complex task. It was a success story. It was a beautiful success story.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, yes.
Antonio?
Yeah. Hello. Good morning again. I was just curious to know if what kind of perception these communities that you have been observing have about the connection between human rights and elephants. Because to be more specific, have you witnessed a perception? In which degree you have witnessed different kinds of perceptions? I mean, first, I imagine the perception of the rights of the animals. So the human perception on the rights of the animals. And I'm curious to know if you also have witnessed a perception, an eventual perception by humans of the rights of humans, that the animals are preserved, are respected. Because it seems to me that the first, it's moving from a perspective of human rights centered on humans, and a perspective of human rights that is more general, more broad, considering living beings in general. And the second is still human rights, but the human right that animals are protected. Or if you have also witnessed other kinds of perceptions that connect human rights with this topic.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very important issue. So then, the relationship between people and elephants in Asia is very, very unique and very beautiful. So then, Antonio, for your name, I guess you are from Spain or from Southern Europe, Portugal? From Portugal. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So neighbor, my family lives in Galicia, very, very close to Portugal. So what I have seen with elephants in Sri Lanka, in where I am right now, in Southwest China, in most parts of Thailand, Myanmar, Laos, we don't know anything like that in Asia. In Europe, it's a sense of respect and revering of an animal that doesn't come from knowing the individual. For example, in Europe, many people like their pet. They have a strong sense of love for the dog or the cat or the horse or something like that. But in many Asian societies, people love elephants as a sacred animal, a bit religious, a bit cultural. I have seen quite often people crying out of the beauty of elephants being around. It's something that as a European, I always felt like, okay, I couldn't really understand well the feeling. And in Sri Lanka, elephants are entrusted to take the tooth of Buddha. So they have a little relic of a tooth of Buddha. So then a very big elephant goes around Kandy taking the tooth of Buddha in the back, and people cry when they see the elephant and the Buddha. And I have witnessed situations where elephants did really, really serious damage into villages, destroying people's houses, destroying people's crop for the next 6 months. And people are excusing the elephant. Well, it's not their fault, it's our fault. We're encroaching the habitat. They have nothing to do. And I was always very, very surprised with that kind of high tolerance that is cultural. And it's with elephants more than with other species. Elephants play a very unique role in many Asian cultures. But at the same time, people love elephants somewhere else. Okay, so then I'm now in a place where elephants have become a massive icon, and there is a huge presence of elephant symbols everywhere. But when we are studying human tolerance towards elephant and elephant conservation, when we talk with people, the most common response is that people like elephants. They are very positive, very, very, very pro animals and pro nature, but they want elephants to be far away, not in my backyard, what we call the NIMBY issue. Yes, I want them, but not in my backyard. And And there is no easy solution for that, because for a long time, people didn't experience much contact with these animals. And when they did, they responded in a, how to say, people 50 years ago had handmade guns and they would chase elephants, and elephants would be scared and they will avoid confrontation. But what has happened in many populations right now, because of fragmentation, habitat is smaller and it's more fragmented. There's much more interface between natural habitats and human habitats. So there's more contact, there's more opportunity for conflict. And also in many populations, elephants have lost fear, because now we do conservation. No one kills elephants legally. Elephants, they can go wherever they want, and they have become braver, bolder, and more willing to take risk. So then people are feeling more intimidated. So what I see is an erosion of this willingness to coexist with elephants. And something that there is in many, many places is a sense of bitterness towards authorities. The authorities care more about elephants than they care about people. That's a very common thing you hear in many countries, in many places, because they can see that, depends on the country, but sometime in the 1970s or 1990s, there was a new policy to create a protected area. And then there were new rules. People cannot hunt anymore. People cannot go and collect some resources from the forest, or they cannot go to some places. And then they feel that conservation is coming at the cost. Okay, so they are losing with conservation. And what you see is that there is a general increase in people's support of conservation values in urban areas. So if you go now to Beijing, to Shanghai, to Singapore, to Kuala Lumpur, everyone is pro-conservation. Everyone loves tigers, everyone loves elephants, everyone loves tropical rainforest, because it doesn't have any cost to them. But to people living next to these animals, they are positive as long as they don't have to pay a price for it. Mm. And now we are in a situation in which the price is increasing in many places, because conservation is becoming locally successful in many places. But people care about elephants. I did some work on human-wildlife conflicts in Galicia and in north to Portugal in the early 2000s. People didn't care about the emotions of wild boar. People didn't care about wolves. And in Asia, people care a lot particularly about elephants. Not so much about tigers or other animals, but about elephants. They care a lot about them and they wish them well, but just they hope that it doesn't affect their life and doesn't affect in a negative way.
Thank you.
Mehmet? Microphone.
Yes. Thank you very much, Ahimsa, for your presentation. I have a question which is related to Antonio's, but different in nuance. I wanted to ask something more specific concerning the human rights relation. Is there already, you have spoken about the relation of the population to elephants, etc., but is there already a widespread, let's say, academic, theoretical, public discourse on the topics you focused on, a community dealing with the things you mentioned, in the framework of human rights? So a sort of specializing group, let's say, of scholars, etc., NGO people dealing in particular with this relation.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. There is an increasing, so there's a specialist group. There's something called IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, that is affiliated with UN, and we have specialist groups. So, for example, I'm an Asian elephant specialist and a tapir specialist. Also, we have a specialist group for human-wildlife conflicts and coexistence. So the issue of human rights is not presented very explicitly, but is very present. So I can tell you what my career has the direction it has taken in the 20 years I have been working on this topic. I came into this for elephant conservation, but most of my time has been dealing with protecting people from elephants. So we understand that even if your goal is to protect elephants, the way to do that is to protecting people from them. And then eventually what takes most of my time is thinking about how to prevent people suffering issues from elephants, and much less how to protect elephants. I think right now elephant threats are more like a long-term and a kind of deep-rooted things, lack of habitat, small population sizes, things about genetic connectivity. But the issue on people are very, very urgent. It's daily elephants coming out of the forest, attacking people's, eating people's paddy fields, threatening people's safety. So then it's much more urgent dealing with the human side. So then that there is common agreement, and there is a body of people thinking about how to promote what we call coexistence, being able to have the animals and the people without neither part suffering what we call not going beyond tolerable losses. So then we try to think about what is tolerable. What are people willing to tolerate? I'm willing to compromise maybe 5% of my income for wildlife. It's something I can stand, but probably not 50%. I'm willing to tolerate not going to some areas because of fear of encountering with wildlife, but probably I'm not willing to be scared every night when I go back home or when I go in the morning when I go to my plantation, right? So then we're trying to identify what is tolerable and trying to see how we can be within those margins, not exceeding this tolerance level. And human rights, it hasn't been discussed much. And maybe going back to what I was saying to Peter before, I think in the last few years, there has been a bit of fear in conservation about human rights, because there were a few cases of accusations, and this was mainly in the context of animal poaching. So that in Africa, there was a massive crisis with elephants being killed for the ivory. And this was part of mafias, the same mafias that were doing some of the human trafficking and drug trafficking. And then some countries like Kenya, or I think also Botswana and maybe some place Mozambique, they adopted an army-like approach to defend elephants. They were shooting to poachers. So basically, poachers who came into national parks to kill elephants or rhinos, they were shot. No, there was just shoot and kill poachers. And there was only one case in India, in Assam. So then I think the conservation community got very scared of being accused of infringing human rights. So probably it's kind of eggshell place to step in. I guess most people feel intimidated of being accused of not caring about people and not knowing how to articulate this discussion and how to participate in this discussion.
But can we actually know this? Because I'm thinking all the time it's a multi-layer and a multi-period issue. Because you mentioned the term habitat. And if you want, in my view, understanding of it, the original habitat where peacefully living together had been destroyed. So you have to catch up on this now. And in legal terms, positive discrimination comes to my mind, where you give special rights due to the fact of previous disadvantages. Now, this means, of course, then, from the little bit I know in this area, that people who actually, for whom elephants and other animals had been a resource, not just about the ivory, but working animals, religious animals, and then this is kind of destroyed, that you permanently breach the rights of one side. So how to get out of this dilemma? Or is it something I misunderstand completely in the entire?
No. You're totally right. Totally. Let me just turn on the light. Just 1 second. I'm going to turn on the light. No, Peter, you are totally right. But the thing is that many things have changed permanently. So I can give you. Let me go first at human-elephant interactions, and I did a lot of work in Malaysia with forest communities, indigenous Organised people. 200 years ago, human density was extremely low in the forest. So then forest was an elephant habitat, and humans living there had a lifestyle that basically prevented conflict with elephants and tigers. So these people had 50,000 years of history of living in a way that they don't create trouble with tigers for them, they don't attack trouble with tigers, and they don't get in trouble with elephants. For example, they didn't practice any agriculture because if you plant something, elephants will come and eat it. They will live in high houses where tigers cannot climb at night. They will not have pets that tigers love to eat, like dogs. They had a lifestyle that was very, very conducive to not get in trouble with these animals. And the agriculture they produced was mainly planting forest fruits like durian or mango, that when it's fruiting, there's a huge abundance. There is no limitation. Everyone can eat. You just need to avoid coinciding with the elephants at the time that elephants are in the tree. And then over time, there was development. So then there were things like modern medicine, vaccination, and there was other source of food. At that time, people were very limited in carbohydrates. So then the human population was always very, very low density. But since the 1930s, 1940s, 1960s, there was a boom in population. And then there was this policy of getting people who were nomadic, they were forced to become sedentary. And they passed from living in villages of 8 to 10 families, very small villages. Suddenly you start to have many more families, people having many kids, the survival rate being much higher, the birth rate being much higher. So suddenly you pass from communities of a few tens of people to a few hundreds of people. And you start to be in the same place. You start to clear the forest. When you clear forest, this is a bit counterintuitive, but elephants don't like good forest because there is very little food for them. The forest is already specialized to protect against elephants. The plants have poison, so there is not a lot of food for elephants in the forest. But whenever you cut a tropical rainforest, what you get is a massive productivity, a lot of growth coming up. That's what elephants like. So suddenly people live in the same place, cut the forest around, elephants begin to concentrate around these villages. People start to plant bananas, people start to plant other things. Elephants love these crops. So then the whole interaction has been forever changed. There is no way back to the previous situation. And then people start to have more resources. They move away from being hunter-gatherers to have a bit of cash crops, to have a bit of other kind of economy. So then they need mobility. They go to the nearby town. They have a road. They start to have vehicles. So the situation has changed forever. And I think we cannot go back to what things were 100 years ago or 150 years ago. Now the thing is, what kind of new future we want? What kind of future is something that is good for everyone? And when we talk about we want, there are many stakeholders with different opinions, different values, and that's where the difference is coming, right? So then if you ask WWF, they want to have more forest and more elephants. If you ask the NGO that focuses on human well-being, they want to have better sanitation, better communications, more income. If you ask to the local community, you will find very diverse responses. Some people want to be left alone. Some people want to have big hotels and big roads in the village. It's very heterogeneous. But the thing is that there is no clear path for the future. And I think we need to be proactive to reach some agreements on what kind of future we envision as a good one. Do we want to protect tropical rainforest? So then maybe we cannot have roads everywhere, because if you build roads everywhere, we know that roads have a massive impact on reducing forest beyond the road area. It has a spillover effect. If we want to have elephants and tigers, we need to protect massive areas of landscape. Otherwise, there is no space for these animals to survive. So then there are places we need to think about what kind of future is acceptable. And yeah, I guess it's a matter of getting different stakeholders to think about what do they want and see how we can compromise that works out.
I'm coming back to my initial question. The who is. I worked a little bit on PNG issues. There it was the rainforest, not elephants. Something beautiful as well. And where the exploitation of the rainforest actually split, and then we come to community issues, split the population. Because some, of course, benefited by the exploitation. At the same time, taking where the entire habitat, the entire living conditions, or how to make from what to live, taking away. That was a forest. If you take one tree away, it's fine. But if you take the entire forest away, after a while there is no foundation anymore to live. And that's then the question again. And probably here, well, I don't know, more severe, that in a way, over time, people are kind of obliged to work against their own interest. Because everybody is, that's the famous saying everybody is, if everybody is standing on the tiptoes, nobody can see better. But at the same time, if one starts, then everybody has to, at least to have a second better view. And this conflict of, well, on the one hand, it's still animals or elephants, people. It's the question then at some stage coming back, people against people, people's interest against people's interest. And then I could say bluntly, we have to breach human rights, meaning the freedom of some people to exploit the majority of people.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on human rights. I'm not sure how well are defined the boundaries of human rights, because in my field, what we see is that, we are talking about conservation, but we have been talking about conflicts among people over conservation. So then it's not that elephants are a bit exceptional, but if we think about most of the tropical rainforest, the rainforest is not an active agent in conflict. It's people, Greenpeace thinking that the forest has more rights than the loggers, and the loggers thinking that they have more rights than the indigenous community, and different people disagreeing on the issue, right? So then what is clear is that we cannot, the conditions have changed, and this is a very, very kind of one-way change. There is no way to go back. We are now 8 billion people on the planet. So PNG has a population of how much? 4 million people or something like that. It's a huge island. The human density is very low, and people don't consume a lot of resources per capita. The ecological footprint is pretty small compared with any one of us. So then you can sustain a low human population in this, exploiting forest resources without having much impact. But if you try to do that in China or you try to do that in India, it's very difficult because the amount of people is huge. So then, and we will very soon run out of these natural resources. And I think the question here, what bothers me at night, with things that I don't have an answer. So I know that when I want to live in a wall, or let's say I want the wall to have tigers. I think tigers are an incredible result of evolution. Have you seen a tiger? Have you spent time observing a tiger? It's magnificent, right? The movement, I saw once a tiger in the forest, and I can tell you that my body reacted like that was not cultural, that was physical, and I want a wall in which this animal is. I don't need to see it to know that is good. I want to have a wall in which tigers are roaming around, in which elephants are roaming around. I think it will be wrong for a single species, human beings, to wipe out many lines of evolution that are an important part of ecosystems. We are, a bit by accident, an extremely successful species, but we'll have a short existence, and we will go as we came, and I don't know, maybe if people like some of these visionaries are successful taking humans to Mars, maybe we succeed to live long, but if not, we will just go extinct in a short period of time from a geological point of view. I would not like that human beings wipe out all these incredible products of evolution, that we don't ruin tropical rainforest, we don't ruin coral reefs, just because all of us want to have a lot of goods. So, but at the same time, I want everyone to have a fair chance to have a good life and to have access to the basic material goods that we consider. And I can see that all of us live in a good environment, and I think we want everyone to have access to that. So then we'll need to balance these two things. The need for people, particularly people who are in developing areas, to have more. And we are talking of billions of people that we will need more resources. Doing that without ruining Indonesia's rainforest, India's good open forest, or African savannas, or many other ecosystems. And that will not happen without some amount of coordination, planning, agreements. And this will involve some compromises. This involves probably many people feeling that they don't get what they thought they deserve, but maybe they can get something that is okay. And that's where understanding what are the basic red lines, I see human rights as a red line. Understanding these red lines can be very helpful to set the negotiation about what we want, what kind of future we want. These are things we should not cross, right? But beyond these limits, what is negotiable? What are we willing to compromise to achieve sustainable development, or development plus conservation? These two things that can be a bit incompatible if we just focus on only one of them.
Okay, I would have from my part, a final question for now. I hope that we can continue at some stage. A little bit, possibly a provocative question, not least because you are not from the law area. But even people are lawyers, they don't know the answer. Would you think, talking about compromise, now I'm going away from the conflict between humans, and would you think there is a possibility to give elephants, tigers, a right?
So give elephants
to give them
right?
a right to be at the negotiation table and say, now here I am, elephant, tiger, nature, I have the right to?
No. Obviously, we need humans to stand. We need some humans to stand on these things. So then I don't see, again, rivers or trees or elephants as an agent that can participate in this discussion. Human beings are very unique. And I think that's our power, being able to be aware of things that go beyond our basic animal desires and basic animal needs. And I think that's where things like conservation science or ecology or biology can play a role to say, well, this is what we think, that it will be a good stand for a good sense of rights. As an ecologist, I think in terms of populations. So, for example, my compromise is I want to have viable elephant populations, viable forest patches, so that I think it's fine to lose some population of viable. I don't want to save every single elephant in the planet. I don't want to save every single tree or every single whale in the planet. What I want is to have something that can be self-sustained and can be part of ecosystem dynamics, can contribute to the ecological function that I was talking at the beginning. And with humans, of course, I think it's off the table to talk about populations in the same way, right? We cannot say, hey, I don't care about every single human being as far as we have some successful populations. Probably that will put me in a very far off in the unacceptable moral position. But for nature, yes, I think in terms of populations, and that's what I would like to say. And I can tell you, as a conservation biologist, I'm a very, very pro-human. You know, I'm often being accused of being too pro-human because I understand that we are humans. I'm a human, and it's hypocritical. I think very often what we see is hypocritical discussions, pretending that humans don't have the final say, and humans are not unique and have more rights than anything else. We humans have more rights. We exert these rights, and I don't see the need to change that. I just think we need to think about what kind of planet we want. And also, let me say this: I'm a pathological optimist. I'm super optimist. So then I do see that we will lose a lot, but I don't think that this is a disaster. I don't see conservation as a doom story, and that's where I'm a bit different to most of my colleagues. You know, my colleagues think that I'm probably not very smart because I don't see how terrible things are. But the way I see things, I think we are in a planet that things have been generally improving over time. I'm very aware. You know, my partner is Chinese. She was born in deep poverty. She was born in a situation that for most Europeans will be difficult to imagine. And to see how her life is right now and where she comes from in 30 few years is for me a cause of massive optimism. So then I think we should acknowledge how much we have a good life, how much we are healthy, how much we have access to information, how we are legally protected, despite all the abuse from state and bad agents and everything. Our life is pretty safe, it's comfortable. You know, I'm not scared of someone coming and invading my home tomorrow. And so then I think for humans, the future is better than the past, and the present is quite okay. So now, how can we achieve without losing that future improvement, still keep a lot of forest, keep clean water, keep things for our interest, but also for tigers to exist. You know, even if we don't benefit from tigers' existence, just because I think they have their own intrinsic right to exist.
Okay, thanks. As I said, it had been my last question. I would have another one. Antonio.
Okay. Sorry. No, I just wanted to share concerning this topic that maybe there is an equivalent to this problem when we think about the rights of children, because children are also in a position that they can't be in the table for negotiation, and so maybe this problem of the rights of animals might be compared somehow with this situation. This is one aspect. And another aspect is that we should consider that the right of non-human organisms is also a human right. So, meaning we as humans have the right that the other organisms in our ecosystem have their rights protected also. So that these are these two things that popped in my mind and I would like to share with you.
Yeah. There was a movement, or there is a movement that hasn't been very successful, but it has been around for a while. It's called compassionate conservation. And the idea, it comes from the idea that that suffering is bad, right? It's the ultimate distinction between, who suffers and who doesn't suffer. So then if something can suffer, it had the right to not suffer. So for example, we don't know if trees suffer or not. Probably they don't suffer in a way we understand very well. They suffer stress, but it's not a painful, probably they don't have the terminal, sensorial cells to experience pain as in an animal way. We know that elephants suffer. Elephants can be sad. Elephants mourn the dead. And elephants can be depressed. If you go to a zoo in Europe and you will see elephants moving like this is a sign of emotional distress out of being enclosed, being captured. Even more interesting, elephants can be excited out of happiness. When a new baby is born, you see elephants being excited in a way that is a bit surprising for many animals. So elephants, in that sense, definitely, I think everyone will agree that we should not welcome suffering. I mean, they have the right to not suffer because of human intervention. The point is, what is the boundary? What is suffering again? What suffering is okay? What suffering is not okay? I suffer stress. I have a few deadlines this week. I'm going to be very stressed this week, and it's an stress that I accept. It's my willingness to take this job and to accept this suffering. So, and I think yes, we need to consider the rights of sentient animals to not suffer. But I prefer emphasize more again on populations. Compassionate conservation was very much focusing on this suffering. It's very much an individual thing. So, for example, compassionate conservation cares about every single elephant. In my case, I will advocate for something that say, we need to make sure that populations are sustainable and self-reproducing and can live in the long term. That's the most important right, the right of existence, even if it involves some individuals suffering or even dying or being killed. It's something that is very controversial in Asia, talk about killing elephants, but for me, the top priority will be to make sure the populations survive. And the other thing is the non-sentient beings. And I think this has been discussed a lot with things like rivers. I know that New Zealand had a long debate about how to give rights to natural ecosystems, and they included human rights to things like rivers in the Constitution. So then, can we give human rights to a river or to a forest? I think it's an interesting idea. It's beyond my expertise to identify the boundaries, the legal complexities, and how to implement. But I think the idea that the rivers have a right to be clean, so then the fish can live there, and the invertebrates can live there, and the hydrology is functioning well. Those things are important, but I will not be too extremist or 100%. I think it will be more like in most cases we want to be able to keep things in a good condition.
Okay, so with these words of hope, or the hope not to lose hope, I think we be close. As I said, I would have more questions, meaning I hope that we can continue this discussion at some stage in some framework. We talked before, and you said in general you are interested and ready to join. So we'll see how this works. And well, for now, thanks to everybody to join, discuss with us, and we'll be in touch with WeChat again at some stage. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
everyone. Has been a
Thank
pleasure
you.
meeting you.
Thank you.
And I hope I was not too off with your discussions, and I hope I contributed something.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.